You must not tell anyone what I am about to tell you, is how Maxine Hong Kingston starts out her captivating memoir, The Woman Warrior. This book is a clash of cultures between the Chinese and the Americans. Literature, like The Woman Warrior, helps us understand the clash of cultures by showing how living in a different country made the Chinese state enclosed and secluded in their own community because of the fear of going against their own culture.
The book's setting was from 1920 to 1970. During this time, when Kingston was living in America, the women's suffrage to vote was happening, and in 1920, they passed an amendment that gave women the right to vote. In 1927, China went through a civil war. Later, in 1930, the Great Depression happened in America, and in 1940, World War II began. Like many other ethnic groups entering America at the time, the immigrants faced social, economic, and legal discrimination that limited their rights and opportunities, keeping most of them living together in pockets of Chinese communities, such as the area in Stockton, California, where Kingston grew up.
Many Chinese families were also moving to the United States, the Promised Land, after the gold rush to start new lives. Kingston's mother used to be a doctor and a very intelligent woman in China, but her intelligence did not meet the American standards and was forced to work in a laundromat. This pushed Kingston's family even further away from the Americans, and her family felt it was best to stay in the Chinese community.
Brave Orchard, Kingston's mother, had very high expectations for Maxine as a young girl. Even though women in America were gaining rights and climbing up the ladder in society, Kingston's Chinese community still saw women as very insignificant if they were not beautiful or a warrior. As a result, Kingston's family was never connected to American life.
From the book, Maxine states, "When we Chinese girls listened to the adults' talk story, we learned that we failed if we grew up to be but wives or slaves. We could be heroines, swordswomen. Even if she had to rage across all China, a swordswoman got even with anybody who could hurt her family."
The two cultures were certainly not connected at the time. Kingston's mother constantly said girls were a disappointment to their families no matter what they accomplished. It is better to have geese than girls. Many of these ideas had been brought over from China. Maxine felt she wasn't Chinese because she couldn't live up to her mother's expectations, and she felt she wasn't American because she couldn't relate to their culture. Kingston stayed within her mother's boundaries. Therefore, she was never able to be part of what was happening in America. Maxine grew up never knowing who she truly was, divided by two cultures, two different ways of life.
When Kingston was a child, she constantly tried to impress her mother by making straight A's, but it was not enough. At the same time, Kingston struggled to turn herself into an American feminine because she wanted to impress the boys at her school.
Kingston spent a majority of her life trying to impress people because she never knew where she truly belonged. She stopped getting straight A's and refused to do anything her mother asked her to do. Even though her family was trying to stay within their own culture, Kingston stepped out of that boundary. This may be why Kingston feels connected with her no-name aunt.
Her aunt was not conforming in the social norm and standards. This shows Kingston's continued struggle between Americanization and her traditional Chinese culture.
Kingston is trying to stand out from her Chinese social norm. She goes through an identity crisis. Kingston does not want to be the same as every other Chinese American girl.
Kingston grew up very frustrated and always felt displaced, like many Chinese American girls probably felt at the time. Kingston believed that for the first generation born in America, it can be especially difficult to adapt to the strict and the heavy-handed traditions of the immigrants compared to the freedom of life in America. But as Kingston got older, she transformed into an independent woman who became a very successful and proud author that wrote about her heritage. As Kingston changed, so was the world around her. Communism was overpowering China, and America was preparing for the Korean War. Kingston was ready to become her own person. She no longer wanted to be thought down and degraded by her mother's expectations and her culture's traditions.
She showed this by later marrying an American, which goes out of her culture. This depicts how she passed the stage of always wanting to impress her mother. By writing The Woman Warrior, it conveys a reflection of the experience of one Chinese American far removed from their culture and traditions. Though Kingston's work may not be universally representative, it does offer a glimpse into the realities of life for many Chinese immigrants to America and their children.